Good afternoon, folks. Robert Chappell here, Executive Editor at Madison365 with your daily update for today, which is Monday, January 3rd. It is Monday. It's a new year. Happy New Year to you. It's a Monday, which means it is Metcalf's Monday. So I have to let you know the update today is brought to you by Metcalf's Market. Metcalf's is a fourth-generation family-owned and operated market with stores in Madison, at Hilldale, and behind the Westtown Mall, and in Wauwatosa at 68th and State. They work to support local farmers and products and have over 3,500 local products on their shelves. And because there's still a pandemic on, and even if there wasn't, anytime you could order for pickup or delivery at shopmetcalfs.com, and we appreciate Metcalfs and their support of Madison365 and the update. So here's the news today, folks. The numbers are bad. It's just there's just to be honest with you, they're not. I mean, I was bracing for this. I was bracing for a large number of new cases. I said a week ago that I didn't think we'd be pushing really high in terms of cases, just because I thought testing would be down so much that we wouldn't see a lot of cases. I was wrong about part of that. Testing is it's not down a lot, but it's not very high either. Right? Over the weekend, over the holiday week, we saw fewer tests delivered. We saw fewer tests processed and reported, and fewer results reported. But we still, today for a Monday, we got 3,883 new cases. That's obviously lower than we saw on Friday. On Thursday, we kind of peaked at 7,700 new cases, right? But still for a Monday, especially a holiday Monday, 3,883 is very high. That pushes our 7-day average of new cases to, I lost it now, 5,000, over 5,000. Sorry, I straight click here. I lost my numbers. 5,000, if I can get it to come up here, just under 5,400. I don't know why this is suddenly just spinning on me. 5,392 per day for the past 7 days. We haven't seen anything over 5,000 since late November of 2020. Okay, over a year ago, 13 months ago, roughly, we saw a 7-day case average over 5,000. Now, the other two numbers that really concern me today are the positive test rate, which, as I mentioned in the little blurb on Facebook, 1 out of 4 tests in the past 7 days has been positive. It's 24.5%, so round that up to 25%. That, according to this chart from the state, it was 24.7 on Saturday and 24.5 yesterday, which is what they're reporting. Any data they're reporting, data they're actually reporting the previous day, but don't worry about that. So our over the weekend basically was 24.7. So we've gone in a week. In 1 week, we've gone from, let's see, 15.2 to 24.5. That's a big jump, and it's driven by two factors, obviously. Lower testing and higher cases, right? So what we'd like to see is more testing. That would ideally drive that positive test rate down, and it would provide us just a better picture of what's happening across the state. This is not surprising. Corey notes that in the Middleton Cross Plains School District, unfortunately, we don't have the staff resources to check every school district website and dashboard. So we appreciate Corey bringing this to us. Previous high. This isn't the previous average. This is the previous high for a week was 27, and for December 27th to January 2nd was 104. Note the dates there. That's when kids were not in school. Right? It seems to me, and this is what I'm told by doctors and epidemiologists and other folks, that there's not a lot of spread happening in schools. Right? It's not an argument for or against school opening, but a lot of the transmission's happening in the community, right? regardless of whether schools are open or not. So we'll have to wait and see. Now, we did mention, we'll talk a bit more after the break. We'll talk more about school situations across the state. But let me finish with the data first. Thanks, Corey. That helped. Corey notes that these are staff and students. So these are adults who may have gone to a Christmas party or, that kind of thing, as well as kids and just generally people who are in Middleton-Crosspoint School District. Thank you, Gail. I appreciate the kind words. One or two other numbers I want to mention. Deaths, thankfully, have stayed relatively low. What I'm looking at right now is 22 new deaths per day in the past 7 days. I shouldn't say that's low. That's not low. It's a lot. Only 6 confirmed deaths yesterday. That puts our total death toll at 10,075 confirmed, 1,110 probable COVID-19 deaths. The way I'm looking at this, and this is open to a little bit of interpretation, but over the course of the pandemic, any given day, the death toll, the death average for that day, for that 7-day period, corresponds roughly to what the cases were doing a month to 6 weeks ago. If you look through most of 2020, pick any day, look at the 7-day case number, look 6 weeks later, you'll see about 1%. The deaths are about 1% of what the cases were. Does that make sense? So like, mid-November last year, you look ahead toward late January of 2021, you look at November 2020 at the number of cases, you look 6 weeks later, and you see about the death rate is about 1%. What I'm seeing now is looking at about 6 weeks in the past from today, where we're looking at about 3,000 cases a day. Today we're looking at 22 deaths, which means that the death rate, if this bears out, okay, this is very amateur statistics, looking at data that's relatively preliminary still. We won't really know all this until like 5 years from now when we're looking back at these stats, right? But the way I'm looking at this, it looks like the case fatality rate has dropped to about 0.8%, 0.8%. So of all cases that are being identified right now, about 0.8% will end in fatality, right? A year ago, that was 1%. Okay, so that's a slight improvement, I believe, driven by the fact that a lot of these cases are in vaccinated people who are much less likely to die, right? So we're having more cases, but a relatively smaller portion of those cases are dying. However, but here's the grain of salt with that. Even a smaller percentage could result in more people dying just because there's so many more cases right now, right? 0.8% of 1,000 is a larger number than 1% of 100, right? Does that make sense? If that's not making sense, let me know in the comments, and I will. I'll let you know that Gail makes a good point here. The numbers we're looking at right now, again, the death rate, the death toll, is what we're looking at from cases about 6 weeks ago or so, which were mostly Delta in the state of Wisconsin. Omicron didn't really hit us until, it was here in small numbers, but it has been increasing rapidly just in the past 2 and 3 weeks. Okay, so we'll see how Omicron shakes out, and if Omicron is less severe, like everybody says it is, you might see the case fatality rate drop even a little further, which would be good news. Now, here's the bad news. Hospitalizations today. My hope was that because Omicron is supposedly less severe and it's hitting vaccinated people who are much less likely to be hospitalized or die, that we would see a spike in cases, but hospitals stay level, but hospitalizations stay level, right? That would be the ideal situation. If cases are going up, well, the ideal situation is where these cases go down and we're all over this, whatever. But if we're going to see more cases, what I was hoping for is that Omicron is hitting vaccinated people and is just less severe anyway. So as cases go up, hospitalizations would stay level or even drop. And consequently, then deaths would stay level or drop. Sorry to say, my optimism is not paying off. And we have jumped on Friday, we had 1,705 people hospitalized. Today we have 1,903. We've gone up 200 over the course of the weekend. And we've gone up 303 in the past 7 days. So in the 5 days leading up to Friday, it was up by 100, and then it jumped by 200 more just in the past 2 days, just over the weekend. 462 of those are in the ICU. That's an increase of 39. That's almost a 10% increase overnight. It's almost a 10% increase in ICU patients since yesterday. There are currently 60 ICU beds available in the state of Wisconsin as of 3:30 this afternoon, that is to say. 30 of them, half, are located in the southeast Wisconsin region, which is basically the Milwaukee area. In the Fox Valley region, which is 8 counties, there are 0 ICU beds available. There's, I think, 5 in the northeast region, which is Green Bay. In the entire south central region, which goes from Dubuque, Iowa, all the way through Madison and through into Columbia County, Dodge County, there are 15. That includes the entire city of Madison, where most of the ICU beds are located, is in Madison. Only 15 in that entire region, 14 counties. It's just not a good situation, right? Even if the 60 available ICU beds were distributed throughout the state, that would not be nearly enough. That's only 4% of the state's normal capacity. Those are going to get filled up quickly. We do have additional staff have arrived at Bellin Hospital in Green Bay from the Navy, the federal government. I'm not sure that's going to alleviate some staff shortages, but I'm not sure that's going to actually make many more beds available. We'll have to wait and see. We are seeing about 16,000 vaccine doses per day, that's an okay number, not high enough, but an okay number. And the vast majority of these folks who are hospitalized are unvaccinated. So that's the COVID situation. Yes, Max. Eeyore is listening in. I was talking to Eeyore about the numbers before, and it's basically it's an Eeyore kind of situation. Tomorrow I will be back in my normal studio, my normal environs with my good audio and good video, and probably trimmed up a little bit on here. Okay, we'll take a short pause. In 30 seconds, we're going to talk a bit about the school situation, which is not particularly good, as well as a local organization that's stepping up to help out with this school situation. This is a great question from Brenda. Before we go to break, I'm going to answer Brenda's question because it's a good question. How many total ICU beds are in Wisconsin? We do have that, and what I'll do, I'm going to actually drop a link into the comments so you guys, because I don't need to hoard all the information. I'm happy to give you the information. No, Brenda, I haven't said that before, really. I've said what I said today was that 60 is about 4% of the total number. But I'm going to, rather than hoard all information for myself, I'm going to make it available to you. It's available to you. I'm just going to point you to it. But I'm happy to help give some context to this information. But basically, the state of Wisconsin, the link I just gave you is to the Wisconsin Hospital Association. The state, the counties do provide some hospitalization data, but the state really doesn't. The Wisconsin Hospital Association does. And they do a great job with this data, as you can see if you hit that link. There are 1,353 ICU beds in the state of Wisconsin, of which 60 are currently available. So that's about 4%, a little more than 4% are currently available. And what you can also do in that, if you hit that link in the upper left, it says choose your healthcare emergency readiness coalition region, HERC, which is breaks the state into 8 regions. And you can see how many patients are in a hospital there, how many ICU beds, how many all the different kinds of beds are available in each region of the state. So wherever you are, you can see the situation where you are, which is really a good data. Lucia asks, have the hospital been cutting down the number of beds recently? Not that I'm aware of, not really the number of beds. I think some hospitals have fewer beds available. Here's my understanding that there are some hospitals, some specific hospitals. This isn't a statewide thing, but there are some hospitals where there are empty beds, but they're not available because there's not enough staff for them. Does that make sense? Like an empty bed is not an available bed if there's no nursing staff or no doctors or whatever to take care of somebody in that bed. Right. So available beds doesn't necessarily mean there could be 100 or more empty beds that have no staff to take care of people in them. Does that make sense? I can't say what the most common diagnosis in ICUs are, because here's the thing. You'll notice there are, about over 1,200 people in ICUs, of which 462 are COVID patients, right? ICUs are used for people coming out of heart surgery, people who just had a heart attack, people who are who had a brain tumor removed, have to spend a day in ICU or two, right? There's lots of different people who are coming in with car accidents, trauma, stuff like that. There's lots of different kinds of patients in the ICU. People have had a stroke. If you have a stroke, you go to ICU, right? Often. So I can't tell you exactly what all 1,290 something people are diagnosed with. I can tell you that most of the COVID patients are not new admits to the hospital. Usually what happens is somebody comes to the ER with trouble breathing, they get admitted to the hospital, they get worse, they get moved to the ICU. And then they either get better or they pass away. And if they do pass away, the question is, is there another patient that has to come in right after them? Or if they get discharged, is there another patient that has to come in right after them? These are all good questions. I hope I'm being helpful. Yeah, this is another thing. I've been paying attention to this number, but I haven't said a lot about it, Corey. Just because there's so many numbers that I'm throwing at you that this is one that I've been kind of keeping in the back of my mind. That there's a lot of hospitals that don't have an adequate supply of PPE. This was really just become a problem just in the past 2 weeks. Like it really has changed in the past couple of weeks, the PPE situation. And I think there's supply chain issues there. There's holiday shipping issues there. There's all sorts of issues there. And I'm hoping that now we're sort of past holidays, where hopefully, supply chain is getting better, and that will ameliorate as well. Okay. If you have more questions, keep them coming. I'm just going to take a short pause, and and I'll be back in 30 seconds. Then we'll talk about some other non-COVID news, some of it good, some of it questionable. But like I said, I'm happy to continue to address questions as they come in. I'm just going to take a short pause. Don't go away. I'll be right back. I mentioned one thing about that video I just showed you, that we made our goal, you guys. I talked to you last week about if we didn't raise $20,000 in November and December, we'd be leaving money on the table, because that's the amount that was being matched, right? We made it. So if you pitched in, if you joined the fam, if you made a one-time donation, thank you. If you didn't, no reason not to. It won't get matched at this moment, but we definitely still need the support to keep this thing going. Okay, we're talking about schools for a minute. Milwaukee schools. Going virtual for a couple of days. I just posted that last night. Racine, I don't think Racine is going virtual. My impression is that Racine is just delaying the return from winter break for a couple of days. I don't know why. If it were me, if I was in charge of the schools, I would just be like, everybody, extra week off. So everybody just sit tight, stay home. Don't mess with. Everybody just sit tight, stay home for one more week, and then we'll resume. And here's the thing, Madison. We talked about this at the end of last week. Madison delayed their return. They were supposed to start up today, and they didn't. They basically took 3 more days off for winter break, and then they're starting Thursday, Friday virtual, and then with the idea that they'll be back in person to stay as of Monday, of next Monday. The issue in Madison and in everywhere else, I think, is not so much cases in the schools. Right, that's a concern. Obviously, you don't want kids to get sick, and children being hospitalized is a growing problem across the country. Right, but that's not the primary concern, or that's not the primary reason they're going virtual for schools. It's a staff shortage. Last week, Friday, we had a press conference with the superintendent of schools in Madison. And we were told that in the month of December, there were only 12 instruction days in December before break. And there were literally thousands of absences of staff that were not covered by substitutes. They just don't have enough substitutes. There are so many people, so many teachers, right, and educational staff, and other staff for that matter, who have had to quarantine for 5 days because they tested positive, or quarantine for longer because they're still really sick after 5 days. And then there are a bunch of subs who are in the same situation, and they just literally can't cover all the classrooms. And there was a time, in the before times, if there was half the staff was gone, you could double up classrooms. And you can't do that in a pandemic. You can't take 2 classrooms of 30 kids and make 1 classroom of 60. You used to be able to do that. It wasn't ideal. It's not a good educational environment, but you could do it for a day if you needed to. Can't do that anymore, or can't do that right now, right? So it's really the biggest problem in the schools right now is staffing, which is why they've had to keep the schools closed. It's not the transmission of virus that's the big issue. It's that there's just literally not enough staff, not enough bus drivers. Right? Everybody's out. Everybody's sick, or having tested positive. Right. So one organization here in Madison that stepped up is the Progress Center for Black Women. This is a photo from inside their new space, newish. They just moved there in August. It's the 7th floor at 30 West Mifflin Street on the Capitol Square. This is the Progress Center for Black Women, and they have opened their space. If any families in Madison need a place to take your kids while they're supposed to be in school this week, you got to go to work. You can take your kids there. You can. There's a story on the website right now, Madison365.org. There's a form you can fill out. There's a phone number you can call, and they can take up to about 30 kids while remaining, keeping the kids kind of relatively distant. They're all going to be masked up. They recommend that the kids bring something of their own from home to kind of help them feel comfortable and safe. But also then Thursday, Friday, when they're doing virtual school, they got good Wi-Fi there. They're going to have educators on site, present, to kind of help out with give that support. They've got some extra laptops and stuff if kids need it. So that's a really meaningful way that a local organization is stepping up to help out families who are kind of suddenly finding themselves in a bind, right? When you're supposed to be sending your kids back to school. Now you can't for a week at least. We'll see what happens. We'll know Thursday. We'll find out Thursday whether or not virtual school will continue. I doubt that it will. I really think they really, really, really want to get back in person, and they will do everything they can to do so. A couple other things to mention today, non-COVID related. This is the outside of the State Department of Public Instruction building. This is a story that I reported in early November. The State Department of Public Instruction, the new superintendent there, Jill Underly, created an equity team, excuse me, what she calls a PEP team, Partnerships and Equitable Practices, which everybody likes. I mean, everybody likes the idea of, naming one person or one department in a big state agency like that is to deal with diversity, equity, inclusion, right? Every state agency should have that. Every big company should have that. And you get 640 something people who work at DPI. Any company of that size should have a DEI person, right? And most of them do these days. So the idea of having a diversity, equity, inclusion team was that a bad idea? The problem is how they did it, right? And if you remember this from November, they just took the director of teaching and learning and told her, this is a white woman, by the way, told her, you are the new diversity, equity, inclusion person. She didn't ask for this. She didn't apply for the job. She's obviously, everybody I talked to had really nothing but praise for this particular person. Tamara Mao is her name. They said she's doing great equity work in her role as director of teaching and learning. She gets it. She understands it. She's committed to diversity and equity, but she didn't ask for the job, and they just gave it to her. And then they took 2 other Black women and said, here's your staff. And none of these folks had asked for it. It was done with no collaboration. There was no process. So of course, staff people of color at DPI were like, what are you doing? We just learned today, I learned this a while ago, and I couldn't quite confirm it, because that's often happens in journalism. You hear about something that is pretty happening, but you can't quite report it yet because it's not 100%. And I'm not going to report anything that's not 100%. We just got the 100% today. This morning, we learned it was confirmed that they're actually going to disband that team and start over and try again. They did admit, when I first reported it back in November, they admitted that it was a mistake the way they did it. And they are now going to put those 3 people back where they were. This is interesting, by the way. The DPI has an onboarding equity training that all new DPI employees go through an equity training. And the superintendent and her top level staff that she brought in never did that when they started last year. So they're going to do that. So the superintendent has committed to that equity training and to basically trying again, starting over, creating a new equity team with input from staff in a way and actually like do a search for a director and all that stuff. So that's, I guess it's decent news if you work for DPI. One last bit we'll mention on national news. This is United States Representative Grace Meng. This is national news that the Asian American legislators, as well as Asian American activists and advocates, are pushing for a national museum of Asian Americans. Legislation last year got the ball rolling on a national museum for women and a national museum for Latinos. We've got the African American Museum in Washington, D.C. That is a fantastic place to go. I have not been yet, but everybody who's been there says it's a really profound experience. So I think it's cool that we've got these museums coming along the line, sort of down the pike for Latinos and women. And there's a group of lawmakers and advocates pushing for the same to celebrate and honor the history, culture, and achievements of Asian Americans, Pacific Islanders, and their contributions. There are many, many, many contributions to American history. So that's what we have for national news today. That story from CNN is on the website at Madison365.org. There, I have talked long enough. There's a lot to talk about, obviously, with these numbers. As I mentioned, I'll be back tomorrow. I would expect, excuse me, we can always hope, right? We can always cross our fingers and hope tomorrow's better. I wouldn't anticipate it being any better, to be honest with you. I think the numbers are going to go up for another week or so, at least. There is some speculation. I've seen some national level like modeling type things that the whole thing could peak around January 9th, which is like Saturday, Sunday of this week. So we might be hitting 10,000 cases a day in Wisconsin a week from now, and then it'll tail off and go away as we head into the spring. We'll see. I think the next few days are going to be pretty brutal in terms of numbers, in terms of hospitalizations, and then the deaths will go up correspondingly, later in January. But I will continue to watch the numbers, listen to the podcast in the morning for a little bit more context, and I'll be back tomorrow. Again, back in the studio, back with the good audio, probably slightly trimmed, a little more groomed here. But Happy New Year, everybody. Thank you for all the questions. Very thoughtful questions. I always appreciate that. And comments. And take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. We're all going to get through this together. We've been saying it for 2 years now almost, right? All right. Have a great evening. We'll talk to you soon.
This is 365 Media.